Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Monsi, and for today's video, I am going to be reading award-winning books from 2024. Originally, I was going to do a Goodreads Choice Awards winners reading vlog, but I was looking at the list of winners and I realized that I had actually already read 4 of them, and none of them were really standouts for me. Let me quickly recap those. So The Women by Kristen Hanna won in the historical fiction category. I gave that one 3 out of 5 stars. Funny Story by Emily Henry won in both the romance category and the audiobook category. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, but my personal winner for romance would have been Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kwong won in the debut novel category. I gave it, I think, a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And then most recently, I read The Third Gilmore Girl by Kelly Bishop, which won in the memoir category, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. In reviewing that data, I don't have the utmost confidence that I will love the winners in the other categories for the Goodreads Choice Awards, so I decided to broaden the scope of this video and include award-winning books from elsewhere in the literary landscape. I still plan on reading 1, maybe 2 of the Goodreads winners in this video, but I won't be exclusively reading those books. Now that that's out of the way, I can tell you what book I'm going to be starting with, and this book actually won 2 awards last year. So it won the Women's Prize for Fiction and the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction, and that book is Brotherless Night by ganeshananthan. This book is also on my 2025 want to read list. It is a historical fiction book set during the Sri Lankan Civil War, and that is all that I know about it. I don't know anything about the characters or the plot or the formatting, nothing like that. I have, however, read the very first sentence of this book, and it is so good that I'm gonna read it out loud to you because I want you to be as intrigued as I am. And it goes like this. I recently sent a letter to a terrorist I used to know. I have so many questions. And the only way I will get answers to those is if I read this book. It's actually my birthday today. I'm 32. Thank you for asking. And it's a Friday, so I took the day off and I'm gonna spend it doing what I love to do, which is reading on my couch. Hi, I have a cold sore, such is life, and I don't want to subject you to it, and I also don't want to subject future Monsi to it when she has to edit this video. So this is what we're going with for the time being. I hope that's okay. It has been a week since I last talked to you, and I am now 20% of the way through this book. The only reason I'm not further along is that I got absorbed by another book, but I have since finished that one, and now I will be devoting all of my attention to Brotherless Night. I want to tell you what this book is about because I haven't gotten the chance to yet. So we are following the first-person perspective of a woman named Sashi, who is telling us the story of her past. We meet her when she is 16 years old and she's living in Jaffna, Sri Lanka. She has 4 brothers, 3 older brothers, 1 younger brother, and 2 really loving parents. Her family is part of the ethnic minority group, the Tamils, and the Tamil people at this time are heavily discriminated against, and in particular, young Tamil men are considered highly suspicious by the Sinhalese government, and they are often targeted by police forces. Justifiably, Sashi has a lot of worry, a lot of concern regarding her brothers and their safety, and we can see how a conflict is emerging between the Tamil minority and the Sinhalese government majority, which is ultimately going to lead to a civil war. Amidst all of this chaos, Sashi herself has these dreams of becoming a doctor. So she is in the throes of studying to get into medical school, and we can see how she's juggling the things that are going on in her personal life and within her family and within the political climate with what she wants to achieve for herself. And that's what I've gathered from the story so far. I'm really enjoying it. The writing is really easy to get into. It's very straightforward, very matter of fact, but also very evocative, and it's really drawing out the emotions in me. I feel very attached to each of her brothers, and I think that's in part because I have my own brother who I'm really close with, so I can relate on a personal level, and I can really feel the fear that Sashi has about her brother's safety. I'm a little nervous to move forward with the story. I get the sense that it's going to break my heart, but I'm also curious and excited to see where it goes. I am about to go skiing for a couple of hours, which is why I even have this thing with me, and then I'm hoping to spend the rest of the day reading, and hopefully I'll have another update for you tonight. Stay tuned. I had a perfect day, an absolutely perfect day. Got outside, took a bath, took a nap, read some more of Brotherless Night, and I've got to say that I am falling in love with this book. I know earlier I described the writing style as being straightforward, and it is, but there's also a lot of depth to it. At one point, the narrator directly addresses readers, and she's like, you think you know what you would do in our shoes and how you would act, but you couldn't possibly know unless you were actually in our position. And it really makes you question yourself and what you think that you would do. And I love the grayness of it. It feels very realistic. These characters feel like they existed. And I think that's a mark of really good historical fiction, and I've missed it. I don't have that much more to say other than I'm liking this book more and more, and I hope that this trend continues. We're actually flying to LA in the morning for the weekend to hang out with family and friends, and I'm going to take my book with me, of course, and I'd like to finish it this weekend and report back to you when I return home. actually at work right now on my lunch break, and it's beautiful outside, so I decided to take to nature. It's clear blue skies, as you can see, and it's 70 degrees out, and the sun is shining, and it's just beautiful. So I thought, what better way to give you an update than this? I have finished Brotherless Night, and I have given it 4 out of 5 stars. I can definitely see why people would love this book, and I can see why it won a couple of different awards. But for me, it was lacking in a couple of places, which I will get into later on. But first, I want to talk about what I really appreciated about this story, because there was so much that I thought was handled very, very well. I really enjoyed how the author captured the complexity of war. There's no good side in the story that we're reading about. Both sides are committing atrocities, and the Tamil militant group that arose in retaliation to the persecution of their people, they chose to respond with violence that matched their oppressors. They are targeting civilians, they're even targeting other Tamil people. And so while you can understand their cause and why they organized themselves in the first place, you can absolutely disagree with the actions that they take. And Sashi, our main character, is navigating it all because she's close to people who are on both sides. And in her pursuit of becoming a doctor, she's trying to operate on this principle of do no harm. And she's consistently asking herself if it is possible to do no harm in a situation like this. And the book raises a lot of ethical questions like that I think are really important to consider when we are talking about wartime. And for that, I think that it is so well worth the read. I have been talking my partner's ear off about this book because it has made me contemplate so much. There's also this really good discussion about language and translation, and the author mentions a few times throughout the book that even though it is written in English, that the conversations that are being had in the book are actually taking place in Tamil. And I'm probably mispronouncing that. I have not gotten a clear consensus on whether it's Tamil or Tamil, so if I'm saying that wrong, I apologize. But anyway, she does talk about that a few times, and about how there isn't always a direct translation from the Tamil language to English, and so when we're reading it in English, we aren't getting the full picture. And I just really like the inclusion of that. Where this book lost me, and it's hard for me to pinpoint exactly what it was, but I think it is in the characterization of our main protagonist. We are reading from her perspective, and we have access to all of her thoughts as she's witnessing all of these horrific events take place. And I wanted more emotion from her. I wanted to feel what she was feeling in those moments. And there were times where it felt like we were just getting a recounting of all of the events that took place. It kind of was like, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And I just wanted more from our main character about how she was feeling and how it was swaying her one way or the other. And I felt like that was missing. But that's kind of nitpicky. And I don't really know why this wasn't a 5-star for me, but that's kind of the reason that I've landed on. I still thought this was a great book, and I highly recommend to anyone who is a lover of historical fiction. I think that if you like historical fiction, you will like this book at the least and love it at the most. The next book that I am going to pick up is The Wedding People by Alison Espach. This book was the winner of the Goodreads Choice Awards for fiction, and I have heard really amazing things about this, and I've also heard people be really critical of this one. So my expectations going into this book are kind of non-existent. I don't know if I'm gonna love it. I don't know if I'm gonna hate it, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. I know more about the wedding people going into it than I did about Brotherless Night. We are following a woman named Phoebe whose life has been upended by her recent divorce, and she checks herself into a hotel with plans to end her life. And while she's staying at this hotel, she crosses paths with a wedding party that is also staying there, and things ensue. I can guess the outcome of this story, but I'm going to view it as more about the journey than the destination, and we will see how it goes. I have to go back into work now. I have a patient in about 15 minutes. So yeah, I will talk to you soon. Okay, I am officially 50% of the way through The Wedding People, and I am really liking it so far. Immediately, I was swept away into this story. It's been such a quick read, and that's been really nice for me after taking 2 weeks to read Brotherless Night. The first 25% of this book focuses mostly on Phoebe's past and the events that have led her to the point where she wants to end her life. I think the author has done a really great job of depicting what the end of a relationship can look like, the way that Phoebe's husband stops noticing her and stops laughing at her jokes and just generally stops caring about her. And there are other things going on in Phoebe's world that have flipped her life upside down, but I don't want to get into those because I think it's better if you read about them yourself. This beginning section reads a lot like a Frederick Bachman novel to me, in that it is peppered with insights into the human experience, a lot of hard-hitting lines that will feel very relatable. If you're a big annotator, you are going to want to have your pen at the ready because there are so many memorable quotes in here that you can underline. The second quarter of the book is where Phoebe starts to interact with the wedding people, and it becomes very dialogue heavy. There's a lot of witty banter and sarcasm, very much in the vein of Emily Henry or Abby Jimenez, in my opinion, and those are two authors whom I love. So you can imagine that I'm very much vibing with the writing style of this book. When it comes to the plot, I'm going to circle back to Frederick Bachman here for a moment, because this plot reminds me a lot of A Man Called Uva in concept, where you have a main character who wants to end their life, but then through these unexpected human encounters, they find a reason to live. And I don't know for certain that that's where The Wedding People is headed because I haven't finished the story yet, but I can assume, right? And if I'm wrong, I won't tell you because that would be a spoiler, but I really don't think that this book is meant to shock you. I think it's meant to take you on an emotional journey. I do have two qualms that I want to discuss. Number one, the rate at which Phoebe appears to be overcoming her depression is a little questionable, and I do wonder what kind of message it's sending to readers who seriously struggle with suicidal ideation. And even in saying this out loud, I will be honest and tell you that this aspect of the story isn't really detracting from my enjoyment, but that's probably because I have never struggled with mental health in this particular way. And so it's kind of easy for me to brush to the side. But I can see how this would really bother some people because it is kind of setting unrealistic expectations. My second minor annoyance is the overly frequent mentioning of the pandemic. It seems like every other page we're getting something about the pandemic or COVID-19 or lockdown or quarantine or virtual visits, which is alluding to the previous items. And it's just a little tiresome and I could do without. Those two critiques aside, I am still very much enjoying this book and looking forward to reading the rest of it. I'm probably just gonna fly through the second half based off of the progress I've made so far. So I will update you when I'm finished. I'm done with The Wedding People, and my initial rating is subject to change. I just completed it a few minutes ago, so you know, I might change my mind once I've sat with it for a little bit longer. But for now, as it stands, I'm gonna give this a 3.5 stars, something around there, which isn't a bad rating. It doesn't mean that I hated this book. There were obviously parts that I really, really liked, as evidenced by my previous clip, but there were also things that I really didn't like by the end of the book. Since I've been talking about this in quarters, I'm going to continue to do that. In the third quarter, the book turns into a full-blown rom-com, which I wasn't expecting. And like any rom-com, a lot of what happens is completely implausible. The way that Phoebe gets involved in the wedding and her friendship with the bride, like none of it made any sense or added up in any kind of way. But the most unrealistic part was Phoebe's 180 from beginning to end. You know, she goes from wanting to kill herself at the start of the story to feeling fully content with her life and where she's at by the end. And it just made me feel like the author didn't handle the topic of suicide with care. And I know that I said in my previous clip that this wasn't something that bothered me, but I don't know, towards the end, it really did start feeling very irresponsible. And there were other things too that made me feel like this. A couple of times Phoebe says things like, "I'm not the type of person to commit suicide." And I'm like, what does that even mean? You know, like who is the type of person to commit suicide? There's not a type of person. I don't know. I didn't like that. And so all of that knocked my rating down a little bit, I think rightfully so. And there was still a lot that I enjoyed about the story. I thought the characters were pretty endearing at times, and I really, really liked Alison Espach's writing style. I think her writing kind of saved this for me. I thought the dialogue was so good. It was so quick and so smart and so sharp. And I would definitely read another Alison Espach book for her writing alone. So yeah, that is my current review of The Wedding People. Stay tuned for a future reading wrap up where I will hopefully have more cohesive thoughts. But in the meantime, I'm going to move on to the third and final book of this video. I've been saving it for last because I think it has the greatest potential to be a 5-star for me. This book won the National Book Award in 2024, and it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, and that is James by Percival Everett. This was on so many people's favorites of 2024 list, and I've been itching to get my hands on it. I don't know really what it's about. I know that it's a retelling of Huckleberry Finn, but I've never read Huckleberry Finn, so yeah, I don't know that much about it other than we're supposed to be reading from the perspective of a slave, maybe, I think. I really don't know, but I'm excited to get into it. I am about to go to the gym, not to exercise, but to use the sauna there. And I might walk for a little bit while I read and maybe like hang out at the cafe. I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to take you along with me and then talk to you once I've read a little bit of James. Hi, I am only one chapter into the book, but I've already learned something and I have to share it immediately because it is so interesting. So Jim is a slave. He's our main narrator. And at first I was wondering why the title of the book is James, but he goes by Jim. And I think what I'm about to get into will explain that a little bit. But basically, Jim speaks differently depending on who he's talking to. So when he is around other slaves, other Black people, he speaks in your standard American English with proper pronunciation and grammar. But the second a white person comes within earshot of him, he switches to this exaggerated slave dialect. And apparently this was a strategy that was actually employed by slaves in an effort to protect themselves, because if they appeared educated to white people, the white people could view that as threatening and that would put the slaves in danger. So this was their way of kind of like flying under the radar, which makes so much sense to me, but it was something that I never knew about, and I'm so fascinated by it. And I think that that's why the title of the book is James, because James is the proper form of Jim. So Jim can't go by James in the book. And I think the title is alluding to that. I am so excited to get into the rest of this. I think it's going to be so good. And yes, I do have high expectations for it, but I think that those expectations might very well be met. So onwards. I am 50% of the way through James. I'm actually a little over halfway through. I probably would have already finished it by now if I hadn't needed to update you, but here I am to talk about it so that I can finish this book because it's so good. The plot in the story really takes off when Jim, our main protagonist, the slave, finds out that he's going to be sold off to another owner in Louisiana. And this is bad for two reasons. Number one, it means that he will be moving further south, which means that he'll be moving further away from freedom. And number two, it means that he'll be separated from his family. So he currently lives with his wife and his daughter, and he knows that if he gets sent away, the likelihood that he'll ever reunite with them is really slim. And so he's like, this cannot happen, and he flees. And on the first night of his escape, he encounters Huck Finn, who is this young teenage white boy that Jim is fairly familiar with. And Huck is also running away from a dangerous situation. Specifically, he's trying to get away from his physically abusive father. And so Jim and Huck embark on this journey of escape together. Their relationship is super unique and really interesting to read about because it's so complicated for a couple different reasons, right? First of all, Jim is an adult and Huck is a teenage boy. And then Jim is a slave and Huck is a white boy who has all these preconceived ideas about slaves given the society that he was raised into. And Huck is very impressionable, he's very naive, he's young, and he has all these questions for Jim about race and religion. And Jim is growing fond of Huck, and they're growing fond of each other. And so Jim is trying to answer the questions as honestly as possible, but while also playing it safe. Like, he's still being careful with his words. He's still speaking in that slave dialect because he can't fully trust Huck. As much as he cares about this young boy, he knows that this young boy is eventually going to turn into a white man. And Jim's experiences with white men to date have been nothing but awful. So their dynamic is just really interesting to read about. They're becoming really close, but there's a lot that plays into that relationship. At this point, I don't have a single critique of this book. It kind of has everything that I'm looking for in a reading experience. The chapters are short. The writing is digestible, which I really wasn't expecting. I think because this is such a widely acclaimed literary novel and it's a spin-off of a classic, I thought that it was going to read kind of like a classic, but that's not the case at all. This is incredibly readable. The story is incredibly compelling, and I'm learning things along the way. Like I already told you about the use of language and the code switching amongst the slaves, but something else that the author has brought up is hypocrisy, and he specifically brings it up in reference to these 17th and 18th century philosophers who were people that vocally denounced slavery, but they actually held very contradictory opinions about race and equality within themselves. So while they were vocal in their critiques, let's say, of slavery, they actually still profited heavily off of slavery, and they still believed that Black people were inferior to white people, which isn't surprising at all, but it's something that's never really been brought to my attention. It's something that I've never read about, and so I'm really glad that it's discussed in this book. I am hoping and praying to the universe that this book is a 5-star read for me. I'm not gonna force it, but right now it is on track to become one, and that was kind of my hope for this video. It's the whole reason that I wanted to read award-winning books. So I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed. Now that I've updated you, I can go and finish this book, and then I will return to you with my final review, final rating, and then we'll wrap this video up. James last night, and this was an easy 5-star read for me. Easy. I can 100% see why this book has been receiving so much praise, so much attention, why it's showing up on top 10 lists, why it's won an award, because this is an excellent book. There are so many things to appreciate about this novel, but what I loved the most is how well balanced everything was. So for example, the story is really entertaining and really engaging and very quick paced, but it's also illuminating and educational. And you can tell that Percival Everett had a lot to say about slavery and a lot of myths to debunk on the topic. Things like slaves being uneducated and unintelligent, the idea that there was such a thing as a good slave owner, which is kind of an oxymoron. Like good and slave owner, those two terms are incongruent with one another. He also challenges the notion of a free state, because when slaves were escaping to the north towards what they thought would be freedom, they were still living in servitude and in oppression, and their rights were still severely restricted. So how freely were they actually living? Those are the things that he's bringing up throughout the entire novel, things that we probably didn't learn about in our American history textbooks growing up. Another example of the balance that I'm talking about is that the story was filled with adventure, and there were some humorous moments too, but there were also some really harrowing, dark, violent scenes that were reflective of that time period. Something that I do want to say about the more violent scenes is that Everett was really frank in his descriptions. He didn't go into a lot of detail or give a lot of graphic descriptions. He just gave you enough information to know what was happening, and that was pretty much it. So if that's something that is dissuading you from reading this book, I do want to point that out. Last thing that I'm going to say is that towards the end of the book, there is a really big reveal that I didn't see coming, and I don't know how I feel about it. I don't feel positively, I don't feel negatively, I feel very neutral, and I don't completely understand it. So mostly I just want to have discussions with people about it. Like, why do you think Everett included it in there? Because it does diverge from the source material. So I know that it has a purpose, but I don't know what that purpose is. And I don't want you to talk about it in the comments because that would be like the biggest spoiler of all. But if you have like any news articles or blogs or reviews from people that do discuss the big reveal, throw them my way because I'm very curious. And yeah, I don't know what more I have to say on the book that I haven't already, but if you've been considering picking it up, you should definitely go read it. That's the reading vlog. I think things panned out how I thought they would. You know, James, I expected it to be a 5-star read, and it was. And I was pretty sure that the Goodreads winner would be my least favorite book that I read in this video, and it was. But I still thought it was decent. I still gave it 3 stars. Don't forget that. I didn't dislike it. I liked all of these books. Okay, that's really it. If you watched this all the way through, you're a real one. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.